You're listening to the last recording of an NCR Ranger dying of radiation poisoning in a collapsed outpost, confessing the truth about how the greatest democracy since the Great War destroyed itself. This is the story of how 700,000 citizens, a constitution, and the dream of restored civilization crumbled not from external invasion, but from the corruption, pride, and cowardice within. The new California Republic didn't fall to Caesar's legion. It committed suicide through 1,000 self-inflicted wounds, and the man speaking to you right now helped pull the trigger. If you're hearing this, then the Republic is gone, really, gone. Not just weakened or fractured like we used to joke about in the barracks, but gone. And I need you to understand something before I tell you what I saw, what I did, in those final months. The new California Republic wasn't just another wasteland government. It was supposed to be proof that we could rebuild, that democracy could bloom again in irradiated soil. But I watched it rot from the inside out. I was there when the Senate chambers in Shady Sands echoed with the last votes ever cast. I saw the breadlines stretch for miles while senators hoarded Brahmin steaks in their bunkers, and I ran. God help me, I ran. When the riots reached the Hall of Congress and the screaming started, you probably heard the propaganda broadcasts. The NCR, bringing democracy back to America. They'd play that jingle on every radio frequency, from Boneyard to New Vegas. Even now, dying of radiation poisoning in this collapsed ranger station, I can still hum it. Funny how lies stick in your head better than truth. I joined the NCR when I was 17. My grandfather had been there at the founding, one of the original settlers from Vault-15, who helped Aradesh and Tandy build Shady Sands from nothing but adobe and hope. He used to tell me stories about those early days, when the Republic was just one town trying to keep raiders out. Back then, every citizen had a rifle and a vote, and both mattered equally. By the time I enlisted, the NCR controlled most of California. We had actual factories pumping out ammunition. We had schools where kids learned to read from pre-war textbooks. We had laws, courts, elected presidents. We had civilization, or at least that's what we told ourselves every time we annexed another settlement for their own protection. You need to understand the scope of what we built before you can grasp what we lost. At its height, the NCR had over 700,000 citizens, 700,000 souls living under one flag, one constitution, one dream of restored America. We had a standing army of 50,000 troops, real soldiers, not raiders with delusions of grandeur. We controlled trade routes from the Pacific to the Mojave. Brahmin Barons got rich, farmers fed nations, politicians promised eternal prosperity. But here's what the recruitment posters never mentioned. Every mile we expanded meant another mile of road to patrol, another town to garrison, another tribe to civilize. The Senate kept voting for expansion because expansion meant taxes, and taxes meant their pockets stayed lined. They never asked if we could hold it all. They never wondered what would happen when we couldn't. I was stationed at Camp Forlorn Hope when the cracks really started showing. This was after the first battle of Hoover Dam. We'd won technically, but the Legion was still out there, waiting. You could feel them watching from across the Colorado. Caesar's Legion, slavers and butchers dressed up like ancient Romans, but organized, disciplined, united under one brutal vision, while we bickered in committee meetings about water rights. The supply convoys stopped coming regularly first. Command said it was temporary logistics restructuring. That's bureaucrat speak for, we can't afford to feed you anymore. We started trading with locals for food, then begging, then taking. I remember the look in a sharecropper's eyes when my squad requisitioned his last Brahmin. He didn't fight. He just asked, I thought you were the good guys. We were. We tried to be. But when you're watching your squad mates get picked off by Legion assassins while the Senate debates funding for another monument in Shady Sands, good becomes a luxury you can't afford. The corruption was like radiation, invisible, but it accumulated in everything it touched. Every government contract had a kickback. Every military promotion had a price. President Kimball gave speeches about unity while his chief of staff sold citizenship papers to raiders who could pay. the Office of Science and Industry, which was supposed to recover pre-war technology for everyone's benefit, became a black market dealership for energy weapons sold to the highest bidder. I transferred to internal security after forlorn hope. Thought maybe I could fix things from the inside. That's when I learned about the real cancer eating the Republic, the Brahmin Barons. See, the NCR's economy ran on those two-headed cattle. Brahmin meant food, leather, transportation, fertilizer, everything. And over the decades, a handful of families had grabbed control of the biggest ranches. The Stockmen's Association, they called themselves. They owned the Senate before elections even happened. Every law that passed, every tax that got levied, every war we fought. Ask yourself who profited, and you'd find a Stockman's brand on it. They pushed for the Mojave campaign, not for democracy or Hoover Dam's electricity, but for the grazing lands. Thousands died taking Nevada so their Brahmin could get fat on fresh grass. And when the Legion pushed back, when our supply lines stretched so thin they snapped, when citizens started asking why their sons were dying for dessert, we couldn't hold. The Barons had already moved their wealth to underground vaults, leaving the Republic to foot the bill in blood. I saw the classified reports. Towns on the frontier going dark, one by one. Settlers fleeing east, telling stories of Legion raids, but also something worse. NCR soldiers turning bandit when their pay stopped coming. Our own troops, men and women who'd sworn oaths to protect the Republic, robbing caravans flying our flag because the government couldn't feed them anymore. The Senate's response? They voted themselves a pay raise and commissioned a study on frontier security optimization. They built a new Capitol building in Shady Sands with golden Brahmin statues, while ranger stations ran out of stim packs. They threw parades for military, victories that never happened, while actual victories went unrewarded. But the moment I knew, really knew, the Republic was doomed, it was during the food riots in the Hub. The Hub had been NCR territory for decades. It was our commercial heart, where all the trade routes converged. But 3 years of drought, plus the Mojave campaign draining resources, plus the Barons hoarding. Their herds meant food prices tripled in 6 months. Citizens who'd paid taxes their whole lives couldn't afford bread. The protests started peaceful. Families holding signs, demanding the Senate release the emergency grain reserves. But those reserves had been sold months ago to fund another push against the Legion. When the truth came out, peaceful turned to desperate. Desperate turned to violent. I was commanding a riot squad when we got the order. Restore order by any means necessary. Those were the exact words. I stood there in my NCR armor, holding an automatic rifle, facing a crowd of my own citizens, hungry, angry, betrayed citizens. And I had to choose. Follow orders and fire on the people I'd sworn to protect, or step aside and watch the Republic tear itself apart. I ordered my squad to stand down. Half of them threw down their weapons and joined the crowd. The other half opened fire anyway. The Hub burned for 3 days. When the smoke cleared, the NCR's economy was broken. Trade routes shifted to avoid us. The gun runners started selling to anyone but us. The followers of the apocalypse withdrew their medical support, saying they couldn't support a government that murdered its own people. And the Legion, watching from across the river, started sending infiltrators into every refugee camp, whispering about the glory of Caesar's peace compared to democracy's chaos. That's when the Senate made their final, fatal mistake. They declared martial law. Martial law meant the Constitution was suspended, elections cancelled. The Senate gave President Kimball emergency powers that would have made Caesar jealous. Suddenly, NCR Rangers weren't just fighting raiders and Legion. They were kicking down doors in Shady Sands, arresting dissidents who asked why their children were starving while politicians grew fat. I was reassigned to Special Intelligence Division. Our official mission was identifying Legion infiltrators and domestic terrorists. Our real job was disappearing anyone who spoke too loud about reform. We had lists. God, we had so many lists. Teachers who taught unofficial history, merchants who refused NCR dollars, farmers who sold food to unauthorized buyers, meaning their hungry neighbors instead of government requisition officers. You want to know how a democracy dies? It doesn't happen all at once. It's 1,000 small surrenders. Every time someone says, It's just temporary, or extraordinary times require extraordinary measures. Every time good people look away because looking means acting, and acting means risk, I looked away. For months, I ran those black sites where interrogations happened. I told myself we were saving the Republic, that once we stabilized, we'd restore the Constitution, hold elections, make things right. But every prisoner who didn't come back, every family that asked questions and then vanished too, every child who watched their parents dragged away in the night, they were cuts, and the Republic was bleeding out from 10,000 cuts we inflicted on ourselves. The frontier collapsed first. Without regular supplies or pay, most garrison troops deserted. Some went home to protect their families. Others turned raider. They already had the weapons and training, might as well use them. Entire battalions just walked away from their posts, leaving settlements defenseless. The Legion didn't even need to invade, they just walked in. Town after town fell without a shot fired. Citizens who'd paid NCR taxes for decades welcomed Caesar's Legion with open arms because at least the Legion brought order. Sure, that order came with slavery and crucifixion, but when your choice is between brutal certainty and chaotic starvation, humans will choose certainty every time. That's the dark truth about our species. We'll trade freedom for food, dignity for safety, democracy for the promise that someone, anyone, is in control. I watched the situation reports come in. Searchlight, fallen, Nipton, burned, Prim, requesting immediate evacuation. Nelson, no response. The Mojave Outpost, our gateway to the east, sent one final transmission. Legion banners on the horizon. May God forgive us for what we couldn't hold. But here's what the reports didn't say. Half those towns welcomed their conquerors. After years of NCR taxation without protection, bureaucracy without benefits, they saw the Legion's slavery as at least honest about what it was. No false promises. No elections that didn't matter. No senators getting rich while citizens got dead. The Brahmin Barons fled first, naturally. One day their ranches were full. The next, they were ghost towns. They'd been moving wealth out for years. Gold, weapons, technology, to hidden bunkers and distant settlements beyond NCR jurisdiction. They left behind empty treasuries and unpaid debts. Also radiation. Did I mention that? When they couldn't move their industrial operations, they sabotaged them. If we can't have it, no one can. The Van Graff energy weapon facility outside. Reading still glows at night from the meltdown they triggered rather than let it be nationalized. Without the Barons, our economy just stopped. NCR dollars became worthless paper overnight. Soldiers couldn't buy food with their pay. Citizens couldn't pay taxes with currency the government wouldn't accept. We tried to switch to a barter system. But you can't run a nation of 700,000 on trading Brahmin hides for bullets. The famines started in the central valleys. The same lands that once fed the entire Republic turned to dust bowls when the irrigation systems failed. No one left who knew how to maintain them. Those engineers had been drafted for the war or arrested as dissidents, or simply stopped showing up when their paychecks bounced. Crops died in the fields. Cattle starved. Children did what children do in famines. They died quietly while their parents went mad from grief. I remember driving through what used to be the breadbasket of the NCR and seeing nothing but skeletal remains of Brahmin and burned farmhouses. Families who'd worked that land for generations, gone. Some fled, some starved, some took the quick way out rather than watch their children waste away. That's when the real horror started. The thing we don't talk about. The thing that proves humans are just animals with delusions of morality. People started disappearing from refugee camps. At first we thought it was Legion slavers or raiders. Then we found the bones, gnawed, cracked open for marrow. Human bones. Hunger does things to people, breaks down every wall between civilized and savage. Those refugee camps became hunting grounds. The weak, the sick, the alone, they'd vanish in the night, and in the morning, certain tents would have meat in their stew pots, while others wondered where their neighbors went. The government's response was to deny it was happening. Then, when the evidence became undeniable, to blame it on Legion infiltrators, corrupting our citizens. But I saw the arrest reports. These weren't foreign agents. These were NCR citizens, people who'd voted in our elections, served in our military, paid their taxes, and then been abandoned to starvation by the republic they'd believed in. We executed them. Public hangings in what was left of our town squares. Maintaining civil order, we called it. But how do you maintain something already broken? How do you enforce laws when the lawmakers have fled? How do you serve a republic that exists only on paper? The military coup attempt shouldn't have surprised anyone, but somehow the Senate acted shocked when General Morrison marched his mechanized division to the outskirts of Shady Sands and demanded Kimball's resignation. Morrison was a war hero. 3 tours in the Mojave, more medals than anyone could count. His troops loved him because he ate the same rations, slept in the same mud, bled in the same battles. He'd watched the Senate's incompetence get his soldiers killed for years. When they declared martial law while hiding in their bunkers, something in him snapped. His terms were simple. Kimball and the Senate step down. Military tribunal takes. Temporary control, restore order, then hold new elections within 2 years. Honestly? Most of the military supported him. Most citizens too. At least Morrison had a plan beyond blame everyone else while the republic burns. But Kimball still had loyalists. More importantly, he had the codes to the nuclear arsenals we'd recovered from old military bases. Yeah, we had nukes. Not many, not ICBMs like the ones that ended the world, but tactical warheads, enough to matter, enough to threaten. The Second Battle of Shady Sands lasted 18 hours. Morrison's tanks against Kimball's bunkers, brother against brother, all wearing the same NCR uniforms, fighting for different versions of a nation that no longer existed. I was in the city when it started, mortar rounds falling like rain, vertibirds strafing anything that moved. The Senate building, that golden monument to corruption, took a direct hit from a mini nuke, turned it to radioactive glass. Poetic justice, maybe, except the senators weren't inside. They'd fled days ago. Morrison's forces broke through at dawn. They found Kimball in the presidential bunker, surrounded by empty Med-X syringes and classified documents he'd been burning. He was ranting about the Eternal Republic and democracy's martyrs when Morrison personally put a bullet in his head. But here's the thing about killing kings. It doesn't fix kingdoms. Morrison declared himself emergency administrator and implemented his restoration plan. Martial law became military dictatorship with better PR. He had the soldiers, but soldiers don't grow food or maintain power grids or teach children. They just follow orders. And Morrison's orders were all about control, not recovery. That's when the real collapse accelerated. Not the slow bleeding of before, but arterial spray. Entire regions declared independence rather than submit to military rule. The Boneyard raised its own flag. Vault City closed its gates. Junktown went back to being, well, Junktown. And in the east, the Legion kept advancing. Morrison had to choose, fight a civil war to maintain control, or face the external threat. He chose both. He lost both. The Legion took Hoover Dam on a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesday was when we used to get our ration cards renewed, back when rations still existed. Morrison had pulled most of the garrison to deal with the Boneyard Rebellion, leaving barely a skeleton crew to hold the most strategic position in the entire Mojave. They didn't even fight. When Legate Lanius and his army appeared on the horizon, the NCR troops just opened the gates. No last stand, no heroic sacrifice, just exhausted men who'd gone months without proper pay, food, or hope, deciding that surrender beat dying for a government that no longer existed. With the dam gone, so was our last source of clean power and water. The lights in Shady Sands went out and never came back on. The water pumps stopped. Within a week, cholera and dysentery swept through the refugee camps. Bodies piled faster than we could burn them. The capital of the new California Republic, the shining city on the hill, became a mass grave. Morrison's response was to declare the Boneyard and Vault City enemies of the state and launch what he called reunification campaigns. But how do you reunify something that was never truly unified? The NCR had always been a collection of independent communities agreeing to work together. Once that agreement broke, we were just targets painted on a map. I led one of those campaigns. God forgive me, I led it. We marched on Vault City with 200 soldiers, most of them conscripts who'd been given a choice between military service or execution for sedition. Half were addicted to jet or psycho, the only way to keep them fighting. The other half were planning to desert the moment combat started. Vault City didn't even bother negotiating. They just activated their laser defense grid and waited. We lost 40 men in the first minute. The rest ran. I ran with them. Let Morrison court-martial a corpse if he wanted. I was done pretending the Republic could be saved. That's when I learned the truth about what happened to the refugees. In the wasteland between territories, massive camps had formed. Hundreds of thousands of former NCR citizens with nowhere to go. No government, no protection, no law except what they made themselves. And what they made was hell. The strong formed gangs. The weak became prey. Children were sold for cans of food. Women. I won't describe what happened to women. Men who'd been doctors, teachers, engineers, reduced to animals fighting over irradiated water. They still flew NCR flags over their tents, like prayer flags to a dead god. I found my sister in one of those camps. She'd been a teacher in Modoc, one of our frontier towns. When the garrison left and raiders came, she fled with nothing but her 6-year-old daughter and a photograph of her husband who died at the first battle of Hoover Dam. She'd walked 300 miles to reach what she thought would be safety. By the time I found her, her daughter was gone. Traded to slavers for medicine when the girl got sick. The medicine was sugar pills. The slavers were Legion scouts, cataloguing future merchandise. My sister she wasn't my sister anymore. Whoever she'd been, that person had died somewhere on those 300 miles. What remained was a hollow thing that looked like her, but spoke in whispers about the colors of sounds and the taste of shadows. Radiation madness, some call it. But I think it's what happens when hope dies, but the body keeps walking. I tried to get her out, find her help. But there was no help. No doctors, no medicine, no anything. Just the wasteland stretching forever, filled with the Republic's living, dead. I gave her my pistol and walked away. I heard the shot an hour later. Sometimes mercy wears a bullet's shape. Morrison's government lasted 6 more months. He held Shady Sands and a few military bases, ruling over rubble and ghosts. The Senate building's radioactive glass skeleton became his headquarters. Fitting, since his administration was just as poisonous and transparent. Then came the morning when his own generals turned on him, not for idealism or democracy, but because he couldn't pay them anymore. The vaults were empty, the armories were empty, the promises were empty. They shot him in the same room where he'd shot Kimball. Different tyrant, same ending. After that, there was no pretense of central government. Local warlords carved up what remained. Some called themselves NCR provisional governments or emergency administrative zones, but they were just raider, gangs with paperwork. They fought each other more than the Legion, making Caesar's job even easier. The Legion rolled through like a plague, methodical and unstoppable. But here's the sick joke. They brought stability. Brutal, enslaving, soul-crushing stability, but stable. Towns that had been starving suddenly had food distribution. Roads that had been death traps became safe to travel. The price was freedom, identity, humanity itself. But when you're watching your children starve, those seem like abstract concepts. Watched from this ranger station as the 2-headed bear flag came down for the last time in Shady Sands. Watched Caesar's legion raise their golden bull in its place. Some citizens fought. Most just stood there empty-faced, beyond caring who ruled them as long as someone did. The NCR didn't die in that moment. It had been dying for years, decades maybe. We'd just been too proud, too busy, too invested in the lie to notice. Every expansion that overextended us, every tax that funded corruption instead of infrastructure, every election where we chose easy lies over hard truths, those were the real killing blows. The Legion just kicked over a corpse that didn't know it was dead. But I need you to understand something, and this is why I'm making this recording even as my Geiger counter screams and my skin sloughs off from radiation poisoning. The New California Republic's failure wasn't inevitable. We weren't doomed by fate or circumstances. We chose this. Every citizen who didn't vote, every soldier who followed illegal orders, every politician who took a bribe, every person who said that's not my problem when it absolutely was. We had everything we needed to succeed. Pre-war technology, fertile land, strong military, educated population. We had the blueprint, the actual Constitution of the United States, recovered from a vault. We knew how democracy was supposed to work. We just decided we were smarter, that we could cut corners, that the rules didn't apply to us. Pride. That's what killed the NCR. Not the Legion, not the radiation, not even the corruption. Pride. We thought we were bringing civilization back to the wasteland, but we were just another tribe. Bigger, better armed, with fancier rituals around picking our chiefs, but still, just a tribe. And when tribes grow beyond their ability to control, they shatter. The fragments are still out there. Settlements flying tattered NCR flags, maintaining the fiction of citizenship in a nation that no longer exists. Rangers still patrol some trade routes, more out of habit than duty. Some towns still hold elections for positions that have no power. They're like those ghouls you see wandering the wasteland, going through the motions of life without actually living. There's rumors that some general named Hanlon is trying to reform a government in the north, that Vault City might create a new confederation, that the Brotherhood of Steel is offering protection to former NCR territories in exchange for technology. Maybe something new will grow from our ashes. Maybe it'll even learn from our mistakes. But it won't be the Republic. The Republic is dead. I'm dying too. This Ranger station, Outpost Charlie we called it, took a radiation storm 2 days ago. My hair's falling out, blood in my vomit. I've got maybe hours, probably less, but I needed to record this. Someone needs to know what really happened. Not the propaganda, not the excuses, but the truth. We were given the chance to rebuild the world, and we rebuilt all its mistakes instead. We had democracy and sold it for security. We had freedom and traded it for comfort. We had hope and exchanged it for fear. And in the end, we got neither security nor comfort, just the wasteland's eternal judgment. If you're hearing this, if you're trying to rebuild, remember the NCR. Remember that good intentions aren't enough, that democratic institutions are only as strong as the people willing to defend them. That corruption isn't something that happens suddenly. It's a slow rot that everyone smells but nobody wants to clean out. Remember that every citizen is responsible for their republic. Every single one. Remember us. And for God's sake, don't become us. This was Sergeant Marcus Chen, 3rd Battalion, NCR Rangers, signing off from the dead Republic. May whatever comes next learn from our failures. May they build something worthy of the world that was burned away. The Geiger counter's going quiet now. That's not good. That means it's given up. Like the Republic. Like me. If you find my body, bury it facing west, toward the coast, toward where Shady Sands used to shine, where democracy used to mean something, where we once were more than just another failed experiment in the wasteland, the New California Republic, 2189 to 2282. We tried.